Caitlin Clark, WNBA Rookie of the Month, packing arenas while averaging 17 and 6 assists. That's not enough to make the Olympic roster. Caitlin gets snubbed.
Caitlin Clark, the #1 pick in April's WNBA draft, who had an up-and-down start to her WNBA career, did not make the Olympic team.
The greatest potential exposure has just given to Team USA. In her latest book, Christine Brennan revealed some shocking details regarding how Caitlin Clark lost her Olympic spot. And you know who did it all? Clark was left at home, but Diana Taurasi was given a roster slot as a retiring present. All along, the conspiracy theorists were correct. Was this just another instance of the old guard defending its own? Or do you believe Diana Taurasi deserved the Olympic slot over Caitlin Clark?
There was a two-way situation going on involving the Olympics and why Caitlin Clark did not make it and why Diana Taurasi did. Now, in case you don't remember, Diana Taurasi was a complete train wreck in the Olympics last year. Non-factor, including at least one DNP, did not play. And I had a theory because Taurasi is now, she got the 6th gold medal. And I had a theory that if they kept Caitlin Clark off the team and put Taurasi on, then because of age, it would prevent Caitlin Clark from ever matching or breaking Diana Taurasi's record. And I think Cheryl Reeve and the committee, my opinion, did that shit on purpose.
Well, who was correct all along? Now, everyone who was claiming that Caitlin Clark was cheated out of her Olympic spot should stop spreading conspiracy theories. What many of us previously knew was just proven by Christine Brennan's book, as if it were a parting party favor. Diana Taurasi was given the roster position. Because the specifics are so crazy, let's dissect this. Before anyone even considered her performance or present skills, Diana Taurasi was essentially assured a place on the team, according to Brennan's findings. It was a farewell gift for her 6th attempt at winning a gold medal. A parting gift, as if you were being sent off with a gold watch at some business retirement celebration.
Caitlin Clark, who is not one of the top 12 to 15 WNBA players, did not make the Olympic team. But Christian Laettner wasn't one of the top 100 players in the NBA, and he made an Olympic team. Olympic basketball team, men's and women's, has always been subjective and very political at the end of the roster. Isaiah Thomas didn't make it. Why? Michael Jordan didn't like him. The WNBA Finals had 700,000 viewers. The draft that included Caitlin Clark had 3 times as many. Life, whether it's a relationship, business, sports, life gives you so few big waves. When they do, grab your surfboard. Women's basketball feels like it's suffering from spite or historically low self-esteem, where they want to prove that they know more than you do. It's an opportunity wait.
Take a moment to consider how absurd that is. You're going to give away one of your 12 roster spots for the Olympics, the biggest basketball stage, as a token of appreciation. Because one position was set aside for someone based on their past performance rather than their current performance, that means that 11 spots were truly contested rather than 12. And at that moment, what was Diana Taurasi doing? Let me remind you, compared to everyone else, she appeared to be playing in slow motion, shot poorly, and averaged single digits in scoring. She seldom played any significant minutes during the actual Olympics, had at least 1 DNP, and was a total non-factor when the games were most important. It's even more offensive because everyone in the basketball community could have predicted this. The demise of Taurasi was no secret. Anyone watching WNBA games could see it. She was unable to keep up with the modern game's pace. Her legs were gone, and her shooting was erratic. Apparently, though, the decision had already been made in a back room, so none of that mattered. In her first WNBA season, Caitlin Clark was scoring 16.8 points, grabbing 5.3 rebounds, and dishing out 6.3 assists a game. She was literally setting rookie records one after another and giving women's basketball more attention than it had received in decades. However, it seems that none of that was important because Diana's spot had already been guaranteed.
In high school, when I made the Olympic team in 1976, Billy Moore said, "I picked you for the future of the game." If they had picked Caitlin Clark, even though she doesn't have a lot of experience, even though she missed some of the training camps, pick her, let her gain that experience, and she's going to be the one in 3, 4, 5 years who's going to be one of the leaders of that USA team. So give her that experience. She's going to put more eyeballs than ever before seen at an Olympics on women's basketball, on women's sports. The crowds are going to be bigger. It was a no-brainer, in my opinion, and the selection committee can do what they want, but I think you picked that 12th spot for the future.
In retrospect, the numbers, which are unavoidable, make this choice appear even worse. In addition to being the most recognizable player in women's basketball, Clark was surpassing Taurasi in all significant statistical categories. There was no comparison from the perspective of basketball alone. There was no similarity in terms of business. However, Taurasi possessed the political connections. According to the book, if Clark had little playing time during the Olympics, USA Basketball was concerned about the reaction of her supporters. It seems that they were worried about negative social media posts and didn't want to cope with the backlash. So let me clarify this, fearing hateful tweets. They excluded the most popular player on women's basketball off the squad. You can't imagine a less serious approach to team building than that. You're worrying about Facebook comments while you're assembling a team to win gold at the Olympics. It would be like selecting your starting lineup by looking at the parents of the people in the stands. Ironically, they were guaranteed to face severe social media criticism because they were afraid of it. Clark's exclusion from the team attracted far more negative publicity than if she had been included and given more minutes. They made the most criticized choice possible because they were so worried about avoiding criticism. Here's the really cynical bit, though, that no one is discussing. It will be very difficult to surpass Diana Taurasi's current record of 6 Olympic gold medals. Caitlin Clark would need to qualify for every Olympic team for the next 20 years and win gold each time in order to match that record. Unless she continues to play until she is in her mid-40s, the maths is essentially impossible. They effectively ensured that record would never be surpassed by excluding Clark from that 2020 for squad and awarding Taurasi her 6th gold. That alone is a significant example of long-term gatekeeping. At the expense of allowing the top players to compete, they preserved Taurasi's legacy. What is so frustrating about this choice is how well thought out it is. This was not a snap decision or a tie between players with equal qualifications. The decision to put legacy protection ahead of current performance was made consciously. In order to preserve the history, they chose to handicap women's basketball after considering its future.
Rooting them on to win gold.
Caitlin Clark won't be going to the Olympics in Paris this summer. The WNBA rookie was left off the Team USA roster. 3 sources say her omission was partly over concerns about how her fans would react when she would likely be getting playing time. Caitlin, through it all, says she's good. She's going to be working towards the next Olympic team.
Honestly, no disappointment. I think it just gives you something to work for. That's a dream. Hopefully one day I can be there, and I think it's just a little more motivation. You remember that, and hopefully in 4 years, when 4 years comes back around, I can be there.
Now, Caitlin could be picked as an alternate. The roster includes Brittany Griner, Brianna Stewart, Diana Taurasi. The Team USA women's national team has won gold at 7 straight Olympic Games dating back to 1990.
It is clear from the whole affair that the old guard is defending their own. For years, women's basketball has been hampered by this same mindset, which bases choices on sentiment and politics rather than ability and performance, giving their pals a good send-off is more important to them than really producing the finest work on the court. Let's also acknowledge the contributions Diana Taurasi made to that Olympic squad. She took up a roster slot that could have gone to someone who might have contributed, was a shadow of her former self, and was unable to keep up with the current game's pace. However, she received her farewell tour because she had the appropriate connections and relationships. When you take into account that Clark has previously demonstrated that she could manage the strain of major games, the entire situation becomes even more absurd. She had been performing in front of angry audiences and shattering attendance records during her years in college. It's absurd to think she couldn't cope with the pressure of the Olympics. Performing under pressure was essentially the foundation of Clark's undergraduate career. She shattered records in championship games, flourished during March Madness, and never failed to perform when the stakes were high. Despite Diana Taurasi's struggles in regular season games, the selection committee apparently believed she couldn't handle the Olympic setting. However, the selection committee reportedly believed that hiring someone who was certain to offer nothing was preferable than taking the chance of dealing with social media reaction. Organizations that think like that continue to be average. Perception is more important to them than performance. Ironically, excluding Clark from the team likely attracted far more criticism than adding her would have. At the time, the decision was heavily criticized. It now appears even worse in light of these revelations. They took a choice that would undoubtedly draw harsh criticism because they were so worried about avoiding it. When Clark was ignored, he responded with elegance. By the way, she utilized it as inspiration to improve rather than openly complaining or blaming others. Clark was back home honing her skills and getting ready for what ended up being an amazing second half of her rookie season, while Diana Taurasi was in Paris picking up her participation prize. The selection committee's choice appears even worse. In light of Clark's professionalism in handling the snub, this player handled rejection well and turned it into motivation to get better. They misunderstood the player and the circumstances, but they were concerned about her supporters being cruel on social media. And that's a different matter. That relaxation over the Olympics break was likely beneficial to Clark. She returned, feeling rejuvenated, and went on a frenzied run to wrap up the season. However, that does not mean that the choice is correct. The top players aren't kept off the team because you believe they need a break. The entire selection process revealed the true workings of the women's basketball establishment. It has nothing to do with skill or quality. It has to do with politics and relationships. Instead of giving current stars opportunities, they would like to recognize prior performance. For decades, the sport has been hampered by this precise way of thinking. This goes beyond a single roster choice. It concerns a pattern of conduct that puts insider relationships ahead of competitive superiority. These judgments have been made for years by the same individuals who are more concerned with preserving the existing quo than advancing the sport. Since we now know how Diana Taurasi earned her 6th gold medal, it essentially has no significance. It was not acquired by skill or competition. It was given to her by a committee that was more concerned with providing her with a dignified farewell than with assembling the most competitive squad. The entire circumstance demonstrates why women's basketball has had difficulty remaining relevant over time. Decisions made on the basis of politics rather than performance lead to subpar results. It seems likely that the Olympic squad would have performed worse under Taurasi and better under Clark, but the decision makers didn't care. This type of stuff occurs frequently in women's sports, but we typically don't get the behind the scenes information, which is incredibly annoying. This time, there is concrete reporting to support the suspicions of many. From the start, the fix was in. Especially pitiful is the selecting committee's justification that they were concerned about the response on social media. These are supposed to be serious individuals who are worried about Instagram comments while making crucial decisions about the nation's Olympic representation. That's not being a leader. Cowardice is what that is. They are ill-equipped to make these choices, as evidenced by their admission that they were swayed by possible social media responses. Twitter sentiment is not used by professional sports organizations to make roster decisions. They base them on what gives them the best chance of winning and on performance potential. It would have been better to view Clark's fame and involvement with his fans as a strength rather than a weakness. Having the most well-known female basketball player on your Olympic squad would have attracted a lot of attention from fans. Rather, they decided to sour relations with those fans and create bad press. The old guard's jealousy and hatred are evident in every aspect of it. The fact that this young kid was receiving more attention than they ever had was intolerable to them, thus, they managed to prevent her from appearing on the largest stage. It's narrow-minded and petty. That's exactly what you would expect from individuals who care more about preserving their own traditions than advancing the sport. This whole problem is made worse by Diana Taurasi's involvement. She must have realized that, given her recent performance, she didn't deserve that position. She took her parting present and cashed it in. However, rather than putting aside her feelings and acting in the team's and the sport's best interests. The absurdity of the entire situation is further demonstrated by the fact that Taurasi hardly played any significant minutes during the Olympics. To make way for a player who ultimately proved to be a non-factor, they cut a player who may have made a real contribution from the team. That is misconduct on the part of the organization. The underlying issues with women's basketball administration are brought to light by this entire incident. Too many choices are based on politics and personal connections rather than performance and quality. The sport will keep having credibility problems until that changes. More than anything else, the Olympics snub most likely inspired Clark. After taking that break, she returned and demonstrated exactly what the selecting committee had been missing. The resentment she felt after being left off that team was the catalyst for her historically strong second-half performance. Regardless of motivation, this was still a grave error on the part of USA Basketball. They had the opportunity to add the sport's most well-liked and gifted young athlete, but they opted for sentiment over logic. You don't create successful programs that way. Even more frustrating is the realization that this was all prearranged from the start. They did not agonize about the last position in a close choice. Everyone else was vying for the remaining positions, and Diana Taurasi was determined to make that squad. Fair competition doesn't exist there, it was rigged from the beginning. The fact that women's basketball is in dire need of rising players like Clark to continue the sport's legacy just serves to highlight how absurd this whole situation is. They decided to preserve the sentiments of elderly warriors who were obviously past their best rather than accepting that and providing her with the largest platform possible. The insular character of women's basketball leadership was also shown by the Olympics issue. These are the same individuals who always make the same choices, and they care more about looking out for their pals than what's best for the sport. One of the most significant errors in the history of women's basketball will be Clark's absence from that Olympic squad. Because they were more focused on providing Diana Taurasi with a dignified farewell, they blew the opportunity to present the sport's biggest star on the grandest stage. The entire situation is a prime illustration of how a sports organization should not be managed. Politics over performance, emotion over ability, and relationships over outcomes lead to decisions that are detrimental to all parties. With this choice, USA Basketball failed Caitlin Clark, the sport, and the supporters. There you have it, then. All along, the Olympics plot was real. Despite being the superior player, Caitlin Clark was left home, while Diana Taurasi received a team slot as a retirement gift. The politics of the old guard are precisely what prevent women's basketball from realizing its full potential. For more truth about what's actually happening in sports, hit the like button and subscribe if this story infuriated you as much as it should have. We don't hesitate to expose corruption and politics that the mainstream media won't cover. There will be more exciting content for you soon.